Kia ora koutou, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I've got 2 layers on. Fiona,
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Rob.
Wow.
Wow.
This is the first time I've seen Unafraid. And I think, you know, it's like once seen, never forgotten.
That's good.
You know, congratulations to you, Lula, Matt, Michael Lett, for support, and also to the late Adrian Burr for his support. Another Tāmaki person.
Yes.
Well, so moving to see what is really a half-century journey.
Yes.
Fiona and I go back a little. We've known each other for a long time. And I took Fiona and Lula upstairs just before we were showing Unafraid, and I showed them the exact spot where the photographs were here in the active eye. Here's the catalogue, which includes images of them, now in your collection at Toi Tāmaki, Auckland Art Gallery. Thank you for Michael Lett for ensuring that occurred, and to Fiona. I have to make a little admission. I think, unless there's someone that is going to disagree with me, I think I'm the only person here today that actually saw those photographs in the less than 120 minutes they were on show, because you never saw it here, did you, Active Eye?
No, I never saw it. No.
Yeah. I think I came in at 10:05 a.m. in March 1976, and by 11:30 they were off the wall. There was no director in the building that day, was there, Fiona?
No, Ernie wasn't in. Ernest Smith was the director at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we don't know who made the decision to react to Pat Bartlett's complaint, do we, here on the staff?
My recollection in reading the files I've read is that because she took a prosecution, a public, an indecency claim, that the police had to investigate. So that's why they came here to the Auckland City Gallery to view the work. And my thinking on it is that because the police had no idea how big the work was or the scale of the work, they were going to an art gallery to view 2 images. They asked for the images to be taken out of the frames to be presented to them at the director's office. So that is how and it probably was the police telling Ernie Smith that, or whoever was in charge, that these photographs, they needed to view them.
Thinking upon it, I just wondered whether Ernest decided that day not to come into work, because you know the gallery staff would have known that there was a complaint laid. The show was hung. It opened at 10 a.m. and then it closed, and the show didn't open again. That was it.
Yep, the doors of the gallery closed.
And
yep.
The curator, Lute Byringer, never made a statement in relation to the Auckland closing of the show, did he?
No.
No, it was absolute. It was like perhaps the most efficient moment of censorship in the 70s at Auckland. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mention in your film that there's a before and after to this Active Eye experience. Once the Active Eye had closed, you were perceived differently. You know, all these photographers who were waiting for the first contemporary art show of photography, first show of contemporary photography to be held here.
In New Zealand, yeah.
They didn't get to, there wasn't shown here.
No. Yeah, people were pretty annoyed at me personally for closing the exhibition. And
you were blamed?
Yes, I was blamed. And only recently someone told me that, who was part of that show. It never got shown.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was, you know, and I mean, there was repercussions everywhere. The exhibition went round the countryside. People wouldn't show it, or the gallery directors just refused. When it got to New Plymouth, it was pretty heated. It got put in the gallery director's office, and you could privately view the work if you requested. There was a public meeting about the work in New Plymouth.
Is that like whether it should be shown or not?
No, just to say that degenerates should have their, you know, it was about saying that it, from a very Christian point of view, was a couple of hundred people in New Plymouth had gathered. And it got widely reported, and then on Sunday they had a church service in New Plymouth at the Reverend Tom Woods preached a sermon about degenerates and, you know, the decline of society, and that I was really to blame. I thought that was quite amazing that you could blame one person. But anyway, it did actually make my life pretty difficult living in Takarangi. I mean, I got my library card got cancelled at the New Plymouth Library. I get other people to take books out for me, of course, but I was denied. They told me they would call my library card in. I had a store account because there was a little community store, so they cancelled my account and asked me immediately for the money. Yeah, and my family reacted quite differently. So some of my family have never forgiven me for the shame I brought upon them. Sorry, I laugh. But I do. I mean, oh, please.
God. Well,
So that's the bit in the film where I say people have never forgotten me for those photographs.
Are those family members still alive and hold the grudge?
Oh, yes.
We should give them a gold star for the longevity of their grudge holding.
Well, I did invite them to view the film, and as far as I know, none of them have come.
Oh,
so I just think that's part of the way it is, and I'm not, you know, like, they just miss out.
Yeah.
They just miss out. And so the Auckland City Gallery, part of that history is quite significant, because I still don't know where those photographs went. They got put on the table. Ernie wasn't in his office. The police viewed them. The police said in their report they did not uplift the work.
Yeah, well,
that was it.
I'm 99.9995% certain that the photographs are not in this building. And they haven't been for the last 40 years. Did I ever tell you I feel a little complicit with this imagery because I helped organise this party that you photographed? The dance party?
Oh.
Yeah.
And David Brown did the poster.
Yeah, Sally was involved with it too. So we share a friend also who's in this photograph.
Yes, Carl.
Carl. And the wonderful thing about Carl is Carl had the most excited and hilarious way of speaking, didn't he? I mean, talk about Oscar Wilde of the Antipodes.
Mm.
You know, he was waspishly, stingingly, wonderfully effective. In fact, he would have been a great barrister if he'd have been allowed to stay in the law department of the university, but we know that he was booted out of that.
Yes.
Because he kept wearing drag going to lectures.
Yeah, and in his second year, when he did a presentation to the bar, which young lawyers did, he was basically hot pants and invited us to go. And we all looked at each other going, he'll never pass. This is the end of Carl. And sadly, he did get kicked out of law school. It was because of his appearance.
Yeah, he came from quite an amazing
He was very
family.
Yeah, he was.
And he was rather brighter than anyone else that was ever next to him. You know, he was seriously intelligent. So he could have been a very famous barrister, I think, if he'd been allowed and accepted. But he was, he was a bit of a firebrand.
when we chose him, my group of friends and I, to write on those photographs. So I printed the photographs with an edge, and Carl was to write on them because he had the gift. He was eloquent, he was intelligent, and he could express what we were all feeling. So the set of 10, he wrote on every one.
And that was the first time, I believe, that photographs and text were combined in New Zealand Photographs.
Yeah, I'd done some earlier series actually. There's a couple of other series I've done earlier, but these were the ones I decided to choose 2 from that series to put into the active eye.
Yeah, but what I'm saying also, Fiona, is that no one at Elam would have been encouraged to put text with photographs on the print.
No,
it would have been
really
seen as completely unacceptable.
Yes.
Because you've got to remember that in 1976, contemporary photography was not being shown here or anywhere else. You would see camera club things at A&P shows, or the Auckland Easter show out at the showgrounds. You'd see contemporary photographs in the camera club tradition. That's right. They also had that in New Plymouth, the camera club.
Yes.
But your photography, which was very much involved, the continuity of your relationships seems to me what the film reinforces is the relation. Your practice is connected with relationships. It always has been, relationships with people in the community. And also, it's completely opposite what was then seen as the most groundbreaking work in portrait photography from America was Diane Arbus. And I'm so, when I was watching your film, that you are a complete opposite of Diane Arbus. She would pop in, get the victim, and leave. But you don't approach photography at all like that. You're the complete opposite.
No.
How come you've always been like this?
Probably because I just felt very strongly that it was an exchange, and that because I can take the photograph, I don't necessarily own it. I have some obligation to that person that if I can produce something that speaks of them to other people publicly, then that's what I have to do, because it's about that communication. I mean, I can go to, I learned to go to exhibitions when I was quite young, probably, and that connection you have with an object, as it was an art object, whatever it was, could basically, as my, dad would say quite crudely, blow your pants off. Or David Brown would say, you'd wet yourself. So that idea that I could produce work that gave people that voice to each other, and I was merely, the conveyor of that voice. So when I did the early work, all that early stuff at dance parties, that was what I felt my job was, to reclaim the space, to have that conversation very strongly with people. And, I say that at the end of the film, that I'm merely the conveyor of this relationship that we talk to each other about. And I find that I get more and more, strongly wanting people to actually talk to each other, especially at the moment. I don't like using all the photographic terms about capturing and shooting, and I hate it. Or, and being a subject. I struggle with subject as a word for a photographer's relationship to someone who's taken a photograph. I've always struggled with it, but I'm not sure where it just came, it's just the way I've always believed of image making as an artist.
I've just been aware in the last couple of months, Fiona, that in the early work, say between 73 and 75, a lot of your images were taken after hours, at night time.
Yeah.
And the only other person doing that was, of course, Max Certainly.
Max, yeah.
But the notion of night photography was problematic. But also, Fiona, your innovations with colour.
Yeah.
That wasn't happening at Elam.
No. It wasn't.
You
and it was a struggle.
That groundwork, I think.
It was a struggle. I mean, it was very difficult. It was a wee moment with students. Everybody collaborated. Well, I was good. I felt like I was good at organising things. So, you know, the engineer site there was demolition at the engineering building. And there was lots of timber, there was doors, and you know, you can go out on a night raid, and we brought back all the timber to build another darkroom within the life modelling studio. So the next morning people turned up at Elam and there was something, what is it? Oh, they're just building something. You know, and we'd framed up the darkroom ready. But prior to that, I was processing everything in little Patterson tanks, little hand processing it. And the person that was a really good printer, Pabu McCann, who you know, absolutely beautiful printer, you know, technically really good, said to me, I hate the smell of these, Fiona, you've got to find your own darkroom. So I moved into another darkroom and basically hand printed the work. And we had a little processor that was a rotary processor with a flat, like a mat, and you poured the chemicals in and it churned like a washing machine. And then you took those chemicals out, you do another print. So I could probably process maybe 3 8x10 prints a day at night, and I'd work at night because it stinks and you just don't want other people interfering. And then I'd head down to Mojo's with these sort of prints. And it was a bit of a battle printing it. And there was no allocation of money for the chemicals within the department or the paper, so yeah.
So your work with photography in colour was really half a decade before Real Pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Ian was working at the time at Real Pictures. This is Ian MacDonald, and but it was a wee moment that students got together, and I sort of corralled them. And for doing that, I would print people's images sometimes for them.
So the journey from analog to digital.
Yeah.
So have you worked digitally for the last 2 decades? Pretty much from the beginning of the century.
As soon as it came out, I was in.
Yeah.
You know, like I wasn't going to hang back. I'm quite thirsty for technology. If I want to do something, I'll do it. But yeah, I still use film. I've still got that Leica that I bought, and it's
M3.
It's 1953, number 13. So
M2.
It's an M3, and of course every 100,000 cameras they gave one to somebody, and in my model, the 13th prior, 13's a good number, they gave it to Sir Edmund Hillary when he climbed the mountain. Goodness. So I got the 13th. I always thought, I mean, those moments for me, I just love things like that with photography. So I've got the 13th camera after Sir Ed's.
So do you have the Summicron or the Summilux lens?
Yeah, I do. I have I have a very simple little set, and I spent almost a whole term's scholarship money buying the Leica. I bought it quite early on.
Fiona's talking, in 2022 terms, Fiona's talking about a camera which is the equivalent of the Silver Seraph Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
The optics are without equal.
Yeah.
They've never been equaled, the Leica lenses. They are great tools working in very difficult and challenging conditions, aren't they? Because you can pre-focus them and know that everything's going to be absolutely in focus. Hey, I've just mad question. Have you ever been tempted by black and white?
I did early work in black and white because nobody else was, just couldn't manage colour. But I did actually, black and white I've always felt uncomfortable with.
So the documentation of Paul Gibbs' performance, is that in black and white?
No, that's black and white, yeah. But it was more, when I was at high school doing my fine arts prelim, like I was 15 or 16, I made my mother buy a colour roll of film so I could present colour photos. for my prelim for getting into art school. People thought that I should have printed them myself and they would have been black and white.
You'd have been the only one that presented colour photographs.
Probably, yeah. And they were rubbish tins at Inglewood. I presented a series.
Oh,
I know.
Still live.
Still live,
yeah.
Environmental edge, yeah. But yeah, so I mean the black and white, I processed black and white at Elam because that's all we had. You know, it was just hanging out for colour.
Yeah.
I really hungered for colour. The first colour images I took, I went home from a holiday from Elam, and it's a series about the farm. It's just photographs of this landscape. It was very beautiful, actually. It's the first colour photographs I took. So it was sort of that comfort too.
When you were at Elam, there was still that ethos of fine art photography, wasn't there? Fine prints.
Yes.
Fine prints in black and white.
Yes.
Often prefabricated. So the setup.
Yep.
Which you never did. You've never done fabricated to be photographed images, ever. No.
And I painted on the wall and I made a little stamp that said pretty colour pictures, and I stamped the backs of my work. Some early images have a stamp on them. And I wrote in my darkroom, pretty colour pictures. It was really, yeah, I found that, yeah, very, but the good thing was the library had wonderful photographic books.
Yes, many of which have been deaccessioned.
Yes, but there was some early colour work. But those early magazines I collected all had recipes in. In the British Journal of Photography each year, they put out recipes of chemicals, so you could actually make your own chemicals.
And you did that?
Yep. I've got a store in the shot in my darkroom. You can see a band of highly horrible chemicals and toxic things, but yes, know how to make chemicals, know how to mix it up. Yeah. It was probably a thing of affording it as well. It was very expensive.
Your community engagement in Taranaki with the whole necessity for environmental consciousness.
Yeah.
What is happening now? Is it still a battle?
Yep, it's still a battle. The council can spend the money unallocated if they want on cleaning the river up, building better treatment facilities, but they tend not to. They tend to say it's too much. And the oil and gas industry is roaring away. They're still flaring, the trucks go through. Yeah, it will end in my lifetime, but I just keep documenting it. But even when I go to council now, I mean, they usually don't want me to do presentations of imagery, but I usually say to them, ask them to do a deputation on behalf of an issue, and always promise them good images, and they usually either say yay or nay. So a couple of times they've said no to a PowerPoint presentation with my images, and I just say, oh, will you miss out?
Yeah. Well, the petrochemical industry in Taranaki has had a huge influence on the politics of the area, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's had a very dedicated or focused, self-aggrandizing support of certain functions of the Taranaki region, hasn't it?
Yeah, the irony is that Monica Brewster's, some of her shares that set up the Govett Brewster were actually in an oil company.
Oh, yeah.
And she was of the Richmond family, in good form, she gave all her wealth back to the city where her, ancestry had come from. She's the her Richmond, Harry Atkinson, all of the early politicians, they were all her maternal, on both sides of her family. She was an only child. She just had a wealth of money.
So she was Richmond Atkinson family.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she gifted it all to the New Plymouth, which is the Govett Brewster, and was one reason why I thought, well, I could cope living there because of the Govett.
Do you think many people in New Plymouth and Taranaki know who Monica Brewster was?
No, I mean, I think the gallery are trying to do that.
Yeah, it'd be good if they did.
Yeah, she was quite, it's quite an interesting legacy to leave for contemporary art. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, particularly with the very first decade of Gillett Brewster, it was doing some of the most important contemporary shows.
Yeah, it was. Yep. And that was one reason why I thought I could cope going back there. At least the Govett would be there and the best people coming in, and it would be an active art scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the first shows were really important to me as in 71 it opened. That was my last year at Inglewood High School. So I met, various people, and that was exciting, meeting Malcolm Ross. I mean, he was the technician, and I met Malcolm, and then I'd come to Elam, and there were people I'd sort of met because of the opening of the Govett.
By the way, if you get a chance this afternoon, just pop by the vitrine by the Research Library entrance, just off the atrium, where Fiona is showing some of her archival material with work of Malcolm Ross as well.
Yeah.
Do you think there's like a before and after Unafraid project? I mean, I know that it took you, was it 3 years?
3 years,
you were involved in this making?
Yeah.
And just how has it affected how you've accessed your archive? Have you had to do a lot of work organising your archive?
Well, I'm pretty organised. See, I've always believed that the work was good. I don't have any problem with being quite boastful about the images I make. I know that they satisfy me and they satisfy the person I'm dealing with. They must be good. That's my bottom line. Carmen wants her Christmas cards or her business card, says they're good, and gets me to do her 70th portrait. That's good. So I need to look after that work. So my archives are very good, except now I have new boxes that say to be filed. After doing the film, and Lula's asking me, what was 1978? Okay, or not much in there, how about 79? Okay. So I've made new boxes that say to be filed because I've gone through a lot of work and now I've got to put it all back together.
Right.
It's quite a lot of work,
so
actually.
Life has become quite chronological.
I've always filed everything, and I've had diaries, and I write. Like you can see in that vitrine, there's the day I took the image. There'll be, if there's any backup on it, there might be a connection with a person, or be a name, or I'm quite specific. That's all I do. I mean, I don't have. I have I did have a goat, but that's my focus about keeping that archive. That's what I do.
Are you still going to the Corso shop?
Yeah, I'd go every Thursday to the hoko. It's called the hoko shop in Waitara. It's called the Waitara Project.
Thursdays?
Every Thursday I'm there.
All day, Thursday?
Yes.
So
well,
Thursday,
from 9 to 3.
Is Thursday your boss lady in Incarnation?
Well, yeah. And we're a collective, and we run pretty well. And if someone doesn't do it, they cover for somebody else. And it generates a lot of money. We don't rely on anything else other than the community. It's a circular system we've developed, and our own little economy about recycling and looking after each other.
So it's all money that goods from the community make money for the community.
Yep, and we give it away. So we don't get paid as volunteers. We just circulate the money and the goodwill and whatever else comes. So people bringing in kai for me or food is because they know me. I knew Nigel's mum, and so he didn't have much money, so he bought me whitebait. I just give him stuff. He chose things, and I said, oh, that's okay. Gives me whitebait. It's a very interesting economy because a couple of people have asked me how I live. And I said, well, probably not like you, but I think that's developed in a small community. Waitara only has like 6,000 people, 6.5.
Has the property ownership situation got better there in the last 10 years, or is it still a lot of leasehold stuff?
The leaseholds have been settled, but there's homelessness, quite a lot of homelessness. There's somebody living in the doorway of the community shop at the moment, Erin. is his name. Yeah, so people, there's homelessness and,
Well, it's all over New Zealand.
Yes, it is. Yeah, people living under the river bridge, except when there's threatened to be a flood, everybody moves out.
The title of the documentary, Unafraid, where does that come from? Can I ask you to Lula, can I ask you to tell us about the title?
It was actually quite hard to find the title at the beginning of the process of making the film, but at the same time, once I got to understand and learn from Fiona and her practice, and after looking at everything that we documented, it became pretty clear how resilient and how what's the word? Yeah, just unafraid. So I got inspired by the word, and it felt right, and that was very early on. I always call it Fiona Clark, but I was searching for the word, and that came very early on, and I said I'm just going to choose that word for now and see how it feels later on, and it still feels right to me. And
I think it's a great title. It really, I mean, you've always been Fiona. I mean, I've known you
50 years.
50 years, and Fiona's always been Fiona. There's never been any form of transformation. You've always been you.
Thanks.
Like you said, we encourage assertiveness.
Yes.
And I've always noticed that about you. You've never been occluded. You've always been clear about what you're doing. And I think a word that I have for Fiona, it's always how I've regarded you, is a hero. You are a hero to me, and you're a hero to many people. And I'd like to thank you for just having a short little conversation here at Toi Tāmaki. This gallery and you have had a bumpy relationship.
We sure
And I publicly
have.
apologise on behalf of Auckland Art Gallery Toi Tāmaki for any bumps that you have experienced in the past. And I apologise to you for that.
Thank you, Ron.
And we're very pleased that you're here. Congratulations to you, Lula, and Matt, and Siobhan. And thank you all for coming this afternoon and being able to experience one of our most important artists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
People might want to ask, if you want to ask me stuff, I'm happy to answer anything if anybody wants to ask. Sorry, but thank you, Ron, for that apology. It's been a while, and people like Tina texted me today to say she was thinking of us, and she's in the Dance Party series. And of course, shortly after that series and the the things, she was in prison for being, not drunk and disorderly, but, just who she was on the street and being picked up and thrown in Mount Eden. So, yeah. Yeah, I want to know when you're going to show the work again. The gallery own that work now, so it'd be nice to see it on the walls after 50 years.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll let you know.
Thanks. I'm watching the space, and I'm living till I'm 80.
Oh, I know.
Anyway, somebody might want to ask something as well from the audience. Totally open. You've got Natasha.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm really curious because of the length of your practice, and maybe this is a question for both of you, how you decided to focus on the bodies of work you did when you're making the documentary. It's beautifully crafted, Linda. Congratulations. It's a beautiful testimony to Fiona's career, but every time I talk to you, Fiona, or hear you talk, there's another body of work somewhere. And how did you think about building the story with those works and selecting, or did you have a really clear idea of the work that you wanted to cover, or did you, Fiona? How did it go?
We talk about it, and Fiona told me what was important to her, like what work was really that she wanted to focus in the film, that the environmental was a big part.
Yeah.
It was very important to Fiona. And I think it was, there were some images that really speak to me, and I researched a lot about Fiona, and the images that I've seen on the internet or on articles, they were normally the same area. So, you know, like the George Courts, I was really interested about that, and because of the rich colors and the way the film documented and all the women there, and the early color as well. So I think it was a combination of just looking to Fiona and Fiona telling me the story about those images and the people and what that means for her. It was quite easy for us to, I mean, it wasn't that easy. There was a lot of work that we couldn't include because we couldn't. But yeah, that's how we did it. Fiona?
Yeah, there was a lot of cuts I saw, so I think there's about 7 different versions, and some of them just don't have parts. So there was a whole series about some early black and white work from Vulcan Lane, the relationship with gangs and the queer community in Auckland, and those safe spaces where people drank, you know, the Occidental Hotel.
The Snake Pit. The
Snake Pit, yes. All of those places where people, the underworld of Auckland lived, or not lived, but existed and socially interacted, that got taken out. And I understand that because but that's another world. That's another little conversation about how did that queer community exist. And that sort of felt like it was a bit of a sidetrack, because that's about the community and it's not necessarily about me. But it does say, how did I get there, you know? And so that changed. I can't remember what else was in there that we took out.
I think that was one of the biggest changes. Because we were kind of setting, we didn't want to set the film chronologically because, we just didn't want to do that. So we worked kind of with the images and what the images speak to us, and the Vulcan Lane was really important. But as Fiona said, there's so much history behind those stories that everything deserves a film.
Yes.
And so we just, we try and focus on what was really valuable for Fiona and as an artist and the people that was around it.
There's a very strong sense of revelation in the film, though, I think. There's so much that is hidden from her story, you know, and the significance of it all becomes even more apparent the further we get away from it. How, in many ways, our gender politics and our sexual politics are put in another lens as a result of the insights that you've had, Fiona. And the fact that, you know, you had some people who just didn't know what you were doing actually is a compliment to you rather than a critique. It just means that you were light years ahead of everyone else. That's how I see it.
Okay. I just, I mean, we're talking on, but I just always saw it was illegal and nobody needed to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you don't say that to your grandmother.
No.
She won't, you know, grandfather won't give you a mallow puff on a Sunday afternoon. You know, it was sort of like you just knew the rules.
Yeah.
And you just knew that certain things were not going to go down well.
Simon, you've got a question.
Nathan.
Oh, Nathan. Oh, sorry, I can't see. I can't recognise anyone. Honestly.
It's usually me making those kind of things.
No, I think I'm wearing the wrong spectacles.
Fiona, first of all, Luna, congratulations on the film. It's a very nicely crafted piece of work, and I really also just like to add to Natasha's compliments that it's nice to see a film on an artist that's not taken an authoritative perspective, not using the voice of God, for example. and letting the artist speak for herself throughout, and it's really quite effective and admirable approach to making a film. Fiona, one of the things I noticed, and amongst your values, I think, or the things that mean something to you, is also quite a particular New Zealand cultural trait, the making things yourself, and I see that admiration in the clothes that people made from the very first dance party, and so on, and in your own collection of things, and the branding also of Tāmaki. And I kind of got a taste of that in how you produce your own work. The magazines being a means to that, with recipes for developing photography, and then your own colour processes, and then the bronzing and the bodybuilding. I was just wondering, is there a thing there that's kind of one informing the other, or am I just noticing something of you in your work? It's not a very well crafted question, I'm sorry.
I think the picture of my father in his workshop answers your question. That thrifty collecting, that making do, that doing it at no matter what cost, you can manage to do it. You can, I mean, it was pretty extraordinary building a coloured darkroom and getting my mates to go to the engineer sites and drag 4x2s back at night, undercover, and we got the men's toilet door, unfortunately, and it was so smelly. Anyway, and someone made an artwork out of the men's label, but it's that culture I got brought up with parents who grew up in the Depression, who always remind me we were born in 1918, the Great Flu, which is very relevant now. They survived. So it was this immediate sense of survival that they both had. And it was that very small, rural, farming family. I think that was part of it. But my father was very thrifty, and my mother was just incredibly determined that her children would be educated. And there's quite a few people. I mean, Malcolm Ross is the same. There's a group, I think there's a real sense of making do and trying to belong and trying to do your best that we got brought up with. And I certainly got a good dose of empathy from my parents. I have siblings who don't have any empathy, so we used to laugh with my parents. You got it, they didn't. So that was part of it, I think, if that answers your question. Yeah. And I think there are other artists that are like that, actually. In our country. And it's a great opportunity, because it means you can work that way, you can work in partnership, you can have a balance. Yeah.
Fiona, for your tenacity, for your self-reliance and your vision, we are deeply grateful.
Thank you.
And please join me in thanking Fiona and thanking Lula and Matt for their contribution to the gallery today.
Thank you. Thank you.